Israel's public perception is so that when the Nelk boys interview Benjamin Netanyahu, that act in and of itself is indicative of how far Israel has fallen. Why the are you a goddamn war criminal with an ICC warrant out for your arrest, and you're going on the Nelk Boys podcast? And not only that, but also when you go on the Nelk Boys podcast, it doesn't actually offer you positive PR. It just ends up collapsing the PR for the Nelk Boys. Because that's the reality here. Because like Nelk Boys interview Benjamin Netanyahu, right? If you were to ask me ahead of time, if they were to ask me ahead of time, I would have told them not to do it. The interview itself got not even 1 million views in one day, which is a decent amount of views. In the middle of the interview with, again, Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, they end up doing like, gambling ads and things of that nature. It's all so dystopian. I know this is a word that we use quite frequently, but bro, dislikes at 120K. The dislike bot is not correct. It's just not, it's not correct. I don't know why you guys believe that. It's never correct. But this to me shows desperation from Israel. They have no allies with the exception of mainstream media, but even they realize that regardless of how many mainstream media attempts they make, they're still not going to be able to change the way people see Israel. It's over. It's done. It is a global pariah. And it's such a global pariah that sending Benjamin Netanyahu on the Full Send podcast with this idiotic assumption that, the Nelk Boys podcast is going to make a bunch of right-wingers look at Benjamin Netanyahu in a positive way is so stupid. It is a spectacularly stupid and spectacularly desperate attempt of trying to do propaganda. It's shocking how bad this situation is. Okay? And Ben Lorber also reported on this, said Haaretz reports Israel is training MAGA Gen Z influencers to combat growing criticism on the right. They're using Israel 365, a Christian-focused Hasbara outfit I wrote about recently for Jewish Currents. Watch this group. They're a crucial conduit between Israeli and the Christian right. Okay? But it's not going to work. It's not going to work because for the generational divide between the generational divide in terms of like how people perceive Israel is so severe that even the Christian right under a certain age group is entirely off the Israel train. Okay? And obviously, the Ryan Grimm even posted about this. It's so funny that I've had like a bunch of serious journalists reach out to me about the Nelk Boys to be like, who the fuck are these guys? Like, why were they interviewing? Like Ryan Grimm hit me up and was like, why are they interviewing Benjamin Netanyahu? Who are these guys? Which was really funny. But not the best post-game interview if you are the head of the Israeli state when you had this conversation with these guys and they had to play catch up and they had to play defense and do crisis PR, as Adam Friedland called, immediately after this interview. It's so controversial that they literally had to turn around and be like, yo, we're kind of sorry that we did this. My bad.
It's a good point. Someone said having Netanyahu on is like having modern day Hitler.
No, I saw that.
Which is, honestly, guys, I'll be honest. I'm here to... It's a good point. We're here to learn, to be honest, guys.
Like, the reason why I'm not like as upset, I guess, as the rest of the internet is because maybe I'm so used to mainstream outlets doing unlimited PR for Israel over and over again that like when I see something like this, when I see an attempt from the Israeli state to try and do propaganda for the Israeli state by sending Benjamin Netanyahu of all fucking people to the Nelk Boys podcast, I see that as a major fucking self-own. And it's also yet another indication that not only have they fallen apart in terms of the PR, that their reputation is so bad that when you have a head of a state, like a head of a foreign state, if you were to just like remove the fact that, he is a genocidaire, if you have this head of a state on a fucking podcast, and instead of people's reaction being like, oh, dude, this is sick, their reaction is incredibly negative, and it literally hurts the Nelk boys more than it helps Benjamin Netanyahu and more than it helps the Nelk boys. Like this interview is not going to be even remotely positive for Benjamin Netanyahu. And it's not positive even for the Nelk boys either. And if I were to put myself in their mindset for a second, okay, slamming fucking happy dads and, ripping lip pillows, upper deckies, and doing crypto gambling or whatever, okay? And I've already interviewed Donald Trump multiple times. I've been on his plane, Air Force One, Trump Force One, and I've interviewed Elon Musk. Like, I've interviewed people that other people have considered villains. In my mind, I'm thinking, what's the difference? You know what I mean? What's the difference? I'm just looking for, there's like content to be made out of interviewing a foreign head of state. The only difference, however, is that while Trump is also a villain, and so is Elon Musk, what these guys don't understand is that the only thing Benjamin Netanyahu is famous for is doing a genocide. At least Trump is like a TV guy. He's more telegenic. He's an American president. You're, an American facing podcast, all this stuff. And so there's a greater defense for interviewing someone like Donald Trump, even though many people would consider that indefensible as well, especially given that they're very clearly ill-equipped to even call into question a bunch of stuff that Trump has done. Okay. Here's Nathan J. Robinson's take. The rise of the idiot interviews like Friedman, Rogan, Vaughn, and the Nelk boys very harmful to journalism. They somehow manage to be worse than mainstream media. They're walking PSAs for the importance of reading books. The problem is that because they have refused to study the issues closely, they don't even know when they're being fed propaganda and therefore can't challenge it effectively. Result is their viewers get exposed to propaganda without hearing any counter arguments. Except I'm not in the same mindset as Nathan J. Robinson, because I don't think this is like as damaging to the discourse. I think the very fact that this interview took place is more newsworthy than any number of different things that this interview allowed Benjamin Netanyahu to do. Does that make sense to you? Do you understand what I'm talking about? No, he doesn't mean Adam Friedland. He means Lex Friedman. Like, it's like when the New York Times writes a story about Zohran Mamdani's like college application or something that from a college they didn't even get into, like Columbia, and they go in and they get like hacked material from a known white supremacist race scientist, right? The story and their coverage of it is not as impactful and is not like as anti-Zohran as the fact that they wrote that story and thought that this was a good story to publish. That becomes the story in and of itself. And it's kind of a similar thing here where, by my estimation, the very fact that the Israeli state thought it was a good idea to go on the fucking Nelk Boys podcast to try and run PR for their ongoing active genocide because they recognize how much they've fallen out of favor overall is the bigger story here. The bigger story here is the desperation for the Israeli state and also the reception, the broad reception from the internet towards the Nelk boys, who obviously have been, even in right-wing circles, but like right-wing circles, left-wing circles, like obviously people have had their minds made on these guys to begin with, right? Especially when they were, promoting Donald Trump. But what's actually more interesting is that Benjamin Netanyahu is such a repulsive, toxic, cancerous individual in what he represents that even the right is attacking the Nelk boys now. Like they're eating it from both ends. That to me is a bigger story than the fact that the Nelk boys even interviewed or what kind of propaganda Benjamin Netanyahu was able to do. Because like a lot of people here want me to like address some of the statements that Benjamin Netanyahu said in this fucking interview. I already know what statements he made in this interview. You want to know why I know these statements that he made in this interview? Because it's pure Hasbara. I've heard it a million times over in my fucking, all the way from my Twitter replies down to every single Israeli envoy that goes on mainstream media and defends Israel's actions. It's always the same. There's not a lot of leeway in what kind of propaganda you can do when you are just like actively committed to doing an ethnic cleansing campaign in broad daylight. ABC, NBC, CBS News ran token reports on Gaza starvation yesterday, and it had all the tropes. Hamas-run health ministry, centering Israeli denials, framing it as the unfortunate result of a new military offensive. Zero mention of open Israeli starvation and depopulation plans. It's important whenever news orgs telephoto shoots of thousands of clearly emaciated people scrambling for food and dozens of images of people being shot or dead to mention the particulars is coming from the Hamas-run health ministry, so we can just ignore everything we're watching. Israeli leaders, including Netanyahu, openly talk about depopulating Gaza. They mock up AI videos showing what it would look like. Every single human rights org says it's textbook ethnic cleansing, yet the U.S. media continues to act like starvation is the unfortunate byproduct of a war. And my point is, like, credible, reputable mainstream institutions unironically do a similar type of propaganda to what the Nelk boys did, but with Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, they probably would be a little bit more contentious with Netanyahu than the Nelk boys were capable of being. What I mean by this, of course, is that they would at least have like to lend some credibility to themselves by asking like a couple questions or maybe a couple follow-ups to Benjamin Netanyahu. But as someone who has watched a lot of Benjamin Netanyahu interviews, let me tell you, okay, it wouldn't be all that different from the Nelk boys. Like, sure, they wouldn't ask them about like whether he prefers Burger King or McDonald's or whatever. I will also make one more statement about how many of these like both sides fucking morons out there have been trying to actively use my commentary against the Nelk boys on this process to say, oh, says you would ask Benjamin Netanyahu if he watches One Piece. No, I wouldn't. You want to know why I wouldn't? Because, as I've said before, one, I didn't even interview a member of Ansar Allah. I interviewed a random Yemeni teenager who I thought was a part of the Ansar Allah movement. But even if he was a part of the Ansar Allah movement, I would have had a more positive interview with him than I would with Benjamin Netanyahu. Because Benjamin Netanyahu is a genocidaire. Ansar Allah, on the other hand, is responding to the genocide that Israel is committing against the Palestinian population. You know, I don't do this like weird neutralization, this weird moralizing. I don't do this like cowardly, both sides are actually kind of bad. No, there is no both sides in a fucking genocide. The responsible party here is obviously the Israeli prime minister. If you can't hold Benjamin Netanyahu to a different standard, it's like we go back to the same like Nazi denialism of like, who's actually a real Nazi? Is Adolf Hitler a real Nazi? If you can't even fucking point the finger of blame at Adolf Hitler for the crime of the Holocaust, then who are you supposed to point it to? There is no fucking both sides.